In today's tutorial, it's all about kids and it's all about the coloring. Or if you like to color, you go for it. Make one of these for yourself. There should be no age limit on these. I apologize. With a 1/4 yard of fabric, you can make 2 of these holders that holds a 3x5 little notepad that you can find pretty much anywhere and 6 crayons. Or you can make a really long one that holds 16 crayons and the notepad if you use the entire 1/4 yard for one project. So I'm going to walk you through how to do these little ones. And then if you want to make it bigger, you're just going to double it up and have a lot of fun. Let's get started with our materials. This is a pretty simple project, so you don't need very much. Once we have this all sewn together, you're going to need a memo book. I use these 3x5 inches and then some crayons, but we can set those aside for now. You're going to need fabric, rotary cutter, pins or clips, 2-inch piece of hook and loop, also known as a Velcro, a piece of fabric that is 5.5 by 1.5 to make our closure tab, and then my favorite, heat erasable pen for marking those lines. You can also use a chalk marker or a pencil, totally your choice, but I like how easy these are to see when you draw on the fabric. And that is going to come off with heat. So once you hit the iron to that, it is completely gone. No one will ever know it was there. And then also I like to use a little square ruler. You can use any kind of ruler that you have, but I like to use this one to do my markings. It's a great size and I will show you that in a little bit. Now this is a 1/4 yard of fabric. I cut it the full width of fabric, then I cut the selvage off one end and I cut it in half. This way we can make 2 of these little crayon carriers out of 1/4 yard of fabric, making it a really economical thing to use if you're making multiple. Because this is a tutorial for the easiest way to do this, you definitely want to use a solid, just a random print like dots or things like stripes, things like that, or something that's not going to look super directional. And here is why. This would be so cute for a little crayon thing, right? When you sew it together, this is going to be the outside, and then we're going to fold this up to put all the crayons and everything, and the inside is going to be completely upside down. This is possible, but that's going to be a whole nother thing. And the first step is to just take this fabric and fold it the long way, right sides together, and then you can either clip or pin these 2 sides, and then we're going to do the same thing with this little closure. We're just going to fold that in half and we're going to sew down these 2 sides. And this one, I'm just going to finger press, which basically means push it with your fingers. And I'm just going to put 1 pin in that. Now we're going to go sew these together. I'm just going to sew down each side with a 1/4 inch seam. The next step is to turn both of these right side out. Now, I want to cut off a teeny bit of the fabric right there, but make sure you do not cut your stitching. So it's kind of like cutting a corner, but you're only cutting one part because we did a fold instead of stitching that other side. And this one, because it's big, really easy to turn right side out. We're going to grab the ironing board in a minute. This one, because it's so skinny, this is 1 inch in between the stitching. It is a bit harder to turn right side out, but I'm going to show you my tip. So the first thing is you want to turn it so that the seam is folded down, right? You don't want to put too much strain on that seam. And then you can just see what you can do with your fingers. But I also like to grab tweezers. And so I will put the tweezers as far in there as I can. I got it. See how it's pinched in there? Now I'm going to keep that pinched and I'm just going to pull that out like that. Okay, now we have to get the corners out. So I'm going to use this handy dandy tool, turning tool in a cute little Riley Blake bird. And the key is just to kind of run it along the seam and be really gentle at those corners because you don't want to push through the fabric. Now, if you don't have something like this, you can use other tools. So you could use a pen as long as you don't have it open because you don't want to be drawing on the inside of your fabric. If you're really careful, you can also use this pointy tip from the cleaning brush that came with your sewing machine. but you have to be really, really gentle because it's quite pointy and it's going to be pretty easy to poke through that fabric, but that does work. You can also use a chopstick, basically anything with a little bit of a point can be used to push it out, but you just want to be gentle. But look at what great points we have on that. Next step involves a little bit of ironing. You're going to push these seams out. We want to have it nice and flat and the seams to be on the edge. And then this is just a fold, but we do want to press that. So everything is nice and flat. The next step, we're going to press this raw edge under about 3/8 of an inch. It doesn't have to be exact. This is one of those beautiful projects. If you do a 1/2 inch, you're going to be totally fine. So once we get that finger pressed, we're just going to take the iron and press that closed. Now we're going to press this one as well. We don't have to fold this end under because it is going to get tucked in here. So yay for that. We just have to make sure it's nice and flat and even. So while we have the iron on, we're going to press this up, which is going to be the start of making our pockets. And we are going to fold it up 2 3/4 inches. So what I'm going to do, and don't iron on your quilting rulers, but it's great to do this. I'm going to put my ruler up here, and then I'm just going to fold this up and see what happens. Well, that's too far. So I'm going to line this edge up with 2 3/4, and then I'm just going to push the ruler until I can feel that the ruler is at this fold. Take my ruler out, and as long as these sides are straight, you're going to have a nice consistent 2 3/4 inches all the way across. So I'm just going to press this in place. Now we're going to take our hook and loop. So we have the scratchy side, which is the hook, and the soft side, which is the loop. And they, as you know, stick together very nicely, and kids can do it. So the soft side is going to go on the back of the crayon container, and the scratchy / hook side is going to go on our tab. And the reason for that, let me show you the one that's done, is that if someone has this laying on their lap, you don't want the scratchy part of the Velcro on their lap, because if they're wearing something knit, that could attach and mess up their clothes. So really important to put the soft side on the back and the scratchy side over here, because that's always going to be face up when they are using this pack. It's the little things, right? So I'm just going to head over to the sewing machine, and I'm going to sew this onto the tab, and then I will be right back and show you how to figure out exactly where that goes on the back of this fabric. You want to use a pretty small stitch length. I'm going to be using a 1.8 because this is a small piece and we're just going to be going around it in a box. You also want to make sure you pull up your bobbin thread, because the front of the closure tab is where the bobbin thread is going to be. So if you skip this step and end up with one of those little bird nests at the beginning of your stitching, it is going to show. So let me remind you how to do that. You're going to put it pretty close to the folded edge, because this raw edge is going to go inside the crayon pack. So I'm just going to put a clip right here just to keep it in place. Okay, if you haven't seen this before, let's do it. So you're going to hold your top thread. You're going to put your presser foot down. You're going to lower your needle, still holding this thread, lift your needle, give it a little tug, and grab that bobbin thread. This is going to stop it from getting sucked under when you get started. So then you're going to put both of these threads under the foot, and you're going to hold them tight while you start. So do like 2 to 3 stitches, keep holding them, and then do 2 to 3 backwards. So that locks those in place. Now these should not get sucked under anymore, so you can let that go. And now we are just going to sew all the way around this loop to attach it to the closure. And you can see we didn't have a big old bird's nest back there. Just need to cut that off. Now, if you didn't want this to show, you could just match your bobbin thread to the main color of your fabric. I'm going to show you how to get the soft side on the back of the crayon pack. The next step is to decide where our closure goes, and then make sure that the loop gets lined up properly on the back of the case. But before we do that, I want to show you one other thing that I forgot to mention when I just folded that up and ironed it. This is the open end, and this is folded, so the closure is going to go here because it gets tucked in. That means that this notepad is going to go on the left. And that is because it's going to roll up nicely and close when the notepad is on the opposite side of the closure. This is the one that I did that way. So you just flip, flip, perfect, right? This was the second one I did. This was the first one I did when I hadn't thought through that part, and I put the closure on the same side as the notepad. Well, if you flip, flip, that doesn't work. So you end up having to like do this really weird flip. Yeah, it's just not good. So the closure is always the opposite side of the notepad. Now, being a right-handed daughter of two left-handed parents, I want to tell you how to do it the opposite way. If you want this to be on the right, all you do is you put your opening on the left and you would fold it up in that direction. That way your closure's over here, your notepad's over here. So now you know how to do it both directions. We're gonna stick with what I already did. Find the center, and you can either measure with a ruler or you can just use your grid if you have it on your mat. So I'm going to fold this back and I'm just gonna place this in here, 2¼ inches. So we have like 2¼ on either side. Have it in about 1/2 inch, and I'm going to pin that in place. And I'm going to do it from both sides just so that it stays straight. Now we're going to turn it over. So this is the back, and you're going to measure 2¾ inches from this side. So I'm just going to put this ruler down, and you can draw a mark or you can just leave your ruler sitting on there. And that is what you're going to use to line up the edge of the loop. Now I'm going to keep that there, and just to make sure I have it lined up well, I'm going to fold this back, making sure this edge and this edge are lined up, and I'm going to very quickly realize, nope, it's too far up. So I'm just going to scooch it down so that that is all lined up, so that it's going to hit very nicely when you go to close. Hold that down, fold that back, pick this up, because the folded part is under there, or we could have just moved that back, but it's easier to see that way. Now I'm going to put a pin in here so I know exactly where I want this to be. And I do kind of put it to one side so I can start sewing here. And now I'm just going to go sew that on just like we sewed the other half on. We have our closure pinned. We have our loop on the back. So we're going to keep it where the hook is facing up. We're going to fold this back up. And the next step is to sew all the way down from here down to here. We're going to go across the bottom and up to here. You know what's no fun? When you forget to hit record. I forgot to hit record as I was sewing that, but thankfully it was something simple, so I think you can get it. So I started up here, and then I doubled back here, and I sewed all the way around, and then I went over the edge and back just to reinforce that edge. So now we can remove this pin. And some people ask, why do I sew on the bottom since it is a fold? Partly just to finish it and give it a little bit more stability, because I don't see the need to put any kind of interfacing in here because the notepad and the crayons keep it pretty solid, but this does help with that a little bit. And it also helps the crayons just kind of stay up a little bit, because you need this fold to be big enough to keep your notepad in place, but not so big that you can't see the crayons. So it can be a little bit of a quandary. Now it is time to do our markings. That means you need to make a decision. Do you want your notepad to be stored like this, where the whole notepad is in the pocket? Or do you want just this back cardboard to be in the pocket and the rest to be out so that it's just easy for the kids or whoever to flip through that? Totally personal preference. If you want it this way, you're going to have the cardboard in here, and then you're just going to take your ruler, go maybe 1/8 inch past the cardboard, and then you're going to just draw a line down the pocket so you know where to sew to make this pocket for the notepad. If you had made a different choice, you can see this stitch line wouldn't work. If you wanted it to be totally tucked in, you're going to want to sew 3.5 for a snug fit or 3 3/4 for an easier fit from the seam, not the edge, because if you go from the edge, it might be a little bit too tight to get your notepad in. So this is our first stitch line that we're going to do. Now we are going to make little pockets for the crayons, just like this. And for that, I want you to start from this edge because sometimes there's not quite enough space in between the notepad to put an extra crayon, and you want to make sure if you have any extra weird amount of space, you want it near the notepad, not over here. I just turn it over. And again, you're going to start your marking from the seam line, not from the edge. And you're going to mark 1 inch. This is what 1 inch looks like. It's nice and roomy. If you want to get more crayons in there and you want it to be a little bit more of a snug fit, you could do like 3/4 of an inch. But I like to do 1 inch myself. And then you're just going to draw 1 inch increments off of the previously drawn line and see how easy it is to see these lines because they're made with this pen. Okay, so see, we have a weird amount. No crayons fitting in there, but we're going to get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 over here. So this is why you measure from this side for your notepad and this side for your crayons. Now we're going to go to the sewing machine. I'm going to remember to hit record, and I'm going to show you how we are going to finish putting these stitch lines, and then all that will be left is adding our notepad and our crayons. I put 2 pins just to make sure this stays nice and flat as I'm sewing these lines. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew in U shapes just to save time. If you want to, you can start and stop on each individual line, but I'm going to start up here, go down. I'm going to go right along that same stitch line and then go back up. So then I'm only starting and stopping a few times. And each time you start, you definitely want to pull up that bobbin thread because your bobbin is going to be on the outside of this project. And you're going to want to go beyond the fold, just like 2 stitches, just again, to reinforce it when people are putting crayons in and out. Now you'll notice I'm about to sew up onto the loop a little bit, which is totally fine. But that's why we put that loop on before we sewed these channels. Now we need to get these lines off of the fabric. And all you need to do is heat up your iron. Look at that. I'm like a child. This amuses me every time. See, all that is left is to add our notebook and our crayons. So we had decided to have it go like that, and that's perfect size. Then you just roll it up and attach that Velcro, and it is ready to go. Let me know in the comments below how you would use these. I'm very, very curious. And if you make and post any of these online, be sure to tag me at Artist Tara Reid.